we welcome in Adam, but we also welcome in Alex Barth of 98.5 The Sports Hub. We want to talk all things Patriots, of course, with you. Alex, how are you doing today, and what have you thought of what the Patriots have done so far in free agency?
I am good. We had a little bit of a hectic afternoon signing. We got the details on the signing they made last night. I think they're making their way through this. I get why people were maybe a little more annoyed and frustrated last night with the lack of moves from the team, but they've come along and checked a lot of the boxes we expected them to check. Starting guard, wide receiver, edge rusher. I think the fullback's a good addition. So hardly the blockbuster it was last year, but they're filling their needs here as we go along.
Methodically, but don't sit here and tell me they're done, Barth. More needs to happen, but let's start at the most recent move, obviously, with Romeo Doubs coming in and sort of supplanting Stefon Diggs. You could look at it that way, in that, you could compare their production. Obviously, Doubs not nearly the numbers that Diggs produced, but I don't think the responsibility was necessarily there in Green Bay by comparison. People are going to run to he's not a number one, and that's okay. I'm not saying he is. But I do think the upside, especially at almost 26 years old now, is much higher than what he gave you in the Green Bay system, where there isn't a number one.
Yeah, and upside's the key word there. I mean, you're paying for potential here. You're not paying for production. Career high 724 yards last year, 55 catches. That's right around his career high of 59. And yeah, those aren't wide receiver one numbers, but when you look at the 3-year window, the 5-year window, you get a guy that's going into his age 26 season, is on the ascension, is going to have a bigger role versus Stefon Diggs, who's going to turn 33, coming off that knee injury. And so you're looking at the future here. And the idea is Romeo Doubs is going to grow with Drake May and grow into that role in the offense. And, Stefon Diggs was right around 1,000 yards last year. That, to me, is not an unrealistic expectation for Romeo Doubs. I think he should have the volume to do it, those 55 catches. Does that number get closer to 70 or 80? Because I don't think this is the outside X receiver that we've kind of heard them sniffing around at different points this offseason. He's going to step in as that Z in the Stefon Diggs role. So more production should come with that, or I should say more opportunities to produce should come with that. And if he can rise to the occasion, again, this is a guy that isn't even 26 yet. He'll be 26 by the time the season comes off. If those numbers go up the next 2 or 3 years, he does profile as somebody who can step into the Diggs role. And then if they can get another receiver, in addition, if you pair him with a guy like A.J. Brown, or they go out and they get one of those X-wide receivers in the first round of the draft, now you're really starting to put that picture together.
All right, Alex, you teed it up perfectly for me. So my job is halfway done with this question. You mentioned them sniffing around. You mentioned the fact that Romeo's more so going to have the opportunity to slot in that Stefon Diggs position. So what say you when it comes to the potential conversations of them still trying to make an appealing offer to an A.J. Brown? Or do you think that they turn to the draft? Because we were talking earlier about the fact that there was so much conversation in the offseason about really utilizing not only the draft, but actually leaning into a rebuild. This season just happened to exceed expectations.
Right. Look, it would be great if they could draft, a really good X receiver and a guy that's going to give you A.J. Brown type numbers. That's hardly a guarantee, especially where they are picking. I mean, the outside guys in this draft, Jordan Tyson is going to go well too high. Maybe Denzel Boston falls, but I wouldn't call that a guarantee, especially when I look at like Buffalo sitting there at 25. He'd be a really good fit there. A.J. Brown, you know what you're getting. He's a known commodity that comes with more. You're going to have to give up draft picks. It's really hard right now for Philadelphia to trade him because he comes with such an immense cap hit. So you're going to essentially have to pay more to get them to take that on. But by adding Romeo Doubs, it's a little less pressure. You have a little more leverage. You're not as desperate. And if this thing does go on to June, you can still be players. Now, in June, he's probably worth more a second-round pick than a first-round pick because it won't be that 31st pick. It'll be an unknown. But, the reporting from Karen Garrigan and others is this won't preclude them from getting A.J. Brown. I don't think it means they're definitely getting him, but it sets up nicely for him to still be a part of their plans, and they don't have to make but at the same time, they don't have to make a desperate move to go out and get him.
So Doubs is a player who chose the Patriots over other teams. And we've been talking about this for a few days now, but do you think the Patriots are a destination for players now that would come here over taking more money with another team?
I don't know. Like, for any player, I don't know that it's overtaking more money unless there's a connection, like some guy played with Drake May in college or played for Mike Vrabel with the Titans or anything like that. I think ultimately you got to pay players to get them in the building. That's going to be the case with 9 to 10 free agents for every team. I think when, as a tiebreaker, right, the opportunity to play with, especially for a wide receiver, the opportunity to play with Drake May versus playing with another quarterback, that's going to be something that you can sell players on. I think Mike Vrabel is very highly spoken about by the players who have played for him. That might be something versus a more unknown coach. So it's going to be tough. It's always tough to get the hometown deal, especially when you're not re-signing a player, when you're bringing in a player who has not been with the team before. But when they get within that ballpark, they had to go so far and above that ballpark. Like last year, for instance, because there really was no proven commodity to join, the money was the sell. Now they still have to get, up there with the top offers. I don't think you're getting anybody taking well below market to come here, but when it's you versus another team and the money's all about the same, they do check a lot of boxes that other teams aren't going to check.
Yeah, the last part that you hit is the part that I was, preaching on our show text thread earlier, is that I think the Patriots still have to come in at market value. It's not the below market days of Brady, Belichick, take a discount, come win here. But in recent years, they've had to go over asking in terms of just trying to get a guy here, and that hasn't panned out. So I think now they've kind of leveled themselves off in that area. But let's stay with wide receiver, whether it's a trade for A.J. Brown, which I know many of us would love to see. I'd still love to see it. I don't think that thing is dead, as you noted. They still need another addition, and I'm not going to be thrilled if that is only addressed in the draft. You got to get somebody else. And you look at who's available, it's a thin list at this point after a guy of, say, the Doubs caliber. Juwan Jennings is still available. Deebo Samuel is still available. Hell, in the right circumstance, I don't think it's necessarily out of the realm of possibility that Diggs comes back on a shorter deal, depending on what his market is elsewhere, if comfort comes into play. How do you see this playing out at that position?
Yeah, I've heard people bring up the Diggs thing. I just wonder personally, if there was a way to get him back on a lesser deal, why not restructure the contract instead of releasing him?
Sure.
Now, again, circumstances may change for both sides. Diggs' market may not be what he thought it was, so you don't rule it out entirely. I think Juwan Jennings is a good receiver. He doesn't really move the needle to me. I think there's some overlap between him and Romeo Doubs. Deebo Samuel, to me at this point, is on the back nine of his career. I don't think he's the kind of addition that moves the needle for the Patriots. It really is that veteran trade market. A.J. Brown, Brian Thomas Jr., if he becomes available, but the latest reporting is that that's probably not going to be the case. I look at it right now, and if this is what they essentially go into the season with, you're talking about hopefully it being lateral, that Doubs takes that next step. He starts to produce like Stephon Diggs did. You maybe get some internal growth from a guy like Kyle Williams, but you're basically back in the spot you were last year. I'm not worried about them being worse at wide receiver, but now it's like they still haven't gotten better. And that's the next step you're looking for. Maybe that's a first-round pick. I don't know. In this draft at 63, if you're getting a guy like that, that might have to be the first-round pick if that's really the plan. Or obviously, again, going to that veteran market and swinging a trade for A.J. Brown.
Well, we'll see what takes place. Hopefully, we can add another target for Drake May. But another thing on Drake May's wish list, not that he's mentioned it, is maybe getting some extra protection in front of him. You have the signing of Verit Tucker, but of course, there's some hesitation behind it. I know I'm a little weary because at first I was like, okay, you get this guy who the Jets held in high regard. The problem was him not being able to stay on the field because of health. But then this $250,000 incentive to suit up comes out, and I am fearful because you're putting a lot of money to make sure that you can get a guy on the field. What do you make of this signing initially, and do you have any sort of fear factor attached to him actually being an impactful player between potentially Campbell and Jared Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a fair concern. This is a guy that has played 43 games or 48 games. I forget the number exactly off the top of my head, in 5 NFL seasons. And that includes missing all of last year with the torn triceps. It was his second time suffering that injury, one on each side. He has an Achilles injury as well there on the resume. So he's struggled to stay on the field, and that's why you see those extreme per-game roster bonuses, is they want to protect themselves in case he can't play. When he does play, he plays at a high level. Now, the money kind of came in between Isaac Seumalo, who's, similar caliber player but is older, is 33 years old and got multiple years. So there's a risk in that as well with the age. And then on the other side, David Edwards, the guard from Buffalo, who got absurd money, but he was the best guard on the market. They could have paid a little more to not have to deal with the injury risk, paid a little less, but taken on an age risk, which some people may say is a bigger risk. Like if Verit Tucker plays, they have their starting guard for the next 3 years. He's a lot more than the bridge player at guard I think some people expected them to get in the veteran market. He's a plug-and-play starter. So there's real upside here. It's a high-risk, high-reward play. I will say their training staff has historically done a good job. I remember a couple years ago when Hunter Henry was a free agent, a lot of people worried about them signing him because he struggled to stay on the field with the Chargers. The Chargers medical staff has a reputation for, having some issues, comes to New England, plays a full season his first year, has been on the field pretty much constantly since, and has raved about the job that the Patriots medical staff did to keep him on the field. You hope you get the same thing with Verit Tucker. These are kind of more extreme and different sorts of injuries than what Hunter Henry dealt with. It's going to be something that we monitor as long as he's here. And I think every week you're going to be looking at how's he feeling? Does he pop up on the injury report? But if he can play, they got themselves a starter. They just took a risk in doing it and saved some money on the back end.
Could part of the risk and reward narrative be, okay, when you're the guy in a system, that's what he was at the Jets, there's a lot more wear and tear, there's a lot more expectation, and that is going to probably re-aggravate certain injuries or, open up new ones. Now you're between a Campbell when healthy, we know what he expects to aspire to, and then a Jared Wilson who had so many promising commentaries around his name, training camp and throughout the season. So you probably have a better tandem playing around you. Do you think that maybe that made this a worthy option because they feel like, okay, if he doesn't have to always be the only guy productive on the line, we can maybe get more out of him?
Maybe a little bit. I just think the nature of that position, it's so physical that there's really no hiding from contact. Like that's a spot where you're going to take a beating no matter what you do. I think it's more about they believe they can get him into their program. And this is, what you do in free agency. They believe they can get him into their program and get him in a spot where he's not as susceptible to these injuries. Now, again, he's torn both triceps. Two of them are very similar injuries that he's come back from. Maybe there's something there that, they can target why that specifically has been an issue for him. And then he has the Achilles as well, of course. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. They had the medical luck, injuries, like that's just part of it in the NFL. And they obviously tremendous last year in that regard. They had very little injury issues. Some of that is luck, but some of that goes to the training staff and the strength and conditioning staff for coming up with a program that keeps these guys healthy. So it's a bet on those guys as much as it is anything else that they're going to have a plan for them to keep them on the field.
Well, when it comes to this move, The Athletic gave a grade for the Patriots, and gave them a D for this move. The reasoning mostly being for these injuries, and saying it's a serious risk the Patriots are taking by making this move. Is it the grade you would give this move, and is it really as serious as a D as a grade?
I'd say like a C plus. It's in the middle because I believe in the upside. Like if he plays, he's going to be one of the better guards in the league. And that ability is worth betting on. I'll be interested to see here in the next couple of days of free agency, even into the draft. They did pay Ben Brown last year, and he'll be back as kind of the backup super utility guy in the interior. He can play guard and center. Do they add another guard and kind of hedge their bets and upgrade the backup spot? And that will... And it's never great when you have to do that after a big money signing, right? But that's what that is. I think D's a little harsh because of what the upside is. It's not like, okay, he's injury prone and when he gets on the field, he's so-so, right? There's a reason that there's so much potential in that contract because he can play up to it. But I mean, that was the big thing with me. When we were going through the free agents, I had Edwards ahead on my list and I had Ciamalo ahead on my list. I didn't know he was going to get 3 years. When you factor that in, it changes my opinion a little bit because he is 32, 33 years old. I generally like to believe in erring on the side of caution when it comes to guys with multiple injuries like this, especially a guy that missed all of last season. So that's where I kind of knocked them, but I understand where the upside is as well.
Alex, you mentioned right off the top wide receiver, O-line, edge. We haven't talked about the edge yet. Of course, one addition there. I know it wasn't the Max Crosby trade or even some of the other guys out there that I really liked, but one guy that we have been talking about obviously is Trey Hendrickson. Again, that's not a trade, that's only money. It's another guy who's coming off an injury, but again, high upside, probably a pretty sizable contract depending on where he ends up going as well, despite the advanced football age. But what do you think of the possibility of him winding up in New England?
I mean, I'd love it. I think it would be a really good addition. Now Draymond Jones slides into that secondary pass rusher role. You get a real threat off the edge playing next to Milton Williams and Christian Barmore. It would make a ton of sense. It's just going to be, what is he looking for? And the fact he hasn't signed makes me think that there's a gap, not just between him and the Patriots, but him and the market. And that Danielle Hunter contract, where he gets, $40 million guaranteed for 1 year might make things a little screwy, especially for a guy, like you mentioned, well into his 30s who's coming off an injury. He may look at the Hunter contract and be like, I have, until last year had comparable production. NFL teams look at the age and the injury and say, yeah, you did, but that was a couple years ago. But if his market becomes depressed, like that's kind of where the Patriots the last few years have taken advantage of signing players. His situation reminds me a lot of Stephon Diggs last year, just on the other side of the ball, an older player who's a proven producer into his 30s, but is coming off of an injury. Teams aren't going to want to pay him for the long term, and he's kind of looking for a spot to reset his market, and you have that opportunity. So I can see it. It still makes sense to me if it's going to be in like maybe even the high 20s. I just think based on what some of these guys were getting, with like Jalen Phillips got, what Boye Mafe got, and Joseph Osai, that's probably about the market for him. But like if he's looking to get into the 30s, I just don't think he's going to get that. But stylistically, it remains a tremendous fit. And again, the sell to me to him is what we just did with Stephon Diggs. Like, you're going to have a chance to come here and do that.
I think he kind of hurt himself by staying with the Bengals this past year and taking that outrageous deal, but that's just my thoughts. Now, we've talked about a number of the players that have gotten signed, and obviously it hasn't been anything super flashy, and we're waiting for a potential splash play if anything can take place with A.J. Brown. But is there another wide receiver in the mix? Because there was some silent chatter when it came to the Chris Olave conversation, but like I don't know if there's anything else explored out there, because Romeo got, I think, a good price for a wide receiver 2 with the potential to be a wide receiver 1. You get a bargain there and you see what takes place as the play comes into mind. But is there anyone else worth kind of maybe splurging on that might not come in as high as Philadelphia, who has all the reins on A.J. Brown?
Again, like if Brian Thomas Jr. becomes available, which the reporting right now is he's not, that I think he's somebody worth giving up a first round or even maybe a little bit more for. At just 23 years old, you don't really see those guys become available at that age, 1,000-yard receiver. Olave, his name's been floated the last couple years, it feels like. I think he's a good player, does have a history of concussions, so this is another guy you're maybe worried about with the injury history. Certainly would be less than A.J. Brown. Would make sense in the system, but when it's one of these guys that comes up for trade like year after year after year, it becomes I'll believe it when I see it. So I think he's going to stay there. They believe in Tyler Shuck. Clearly, they want to build around him, and trading Chris Olave doesn't really help you with that. So it's not a massive market right now, especially compared to the last few seasons where we had 3 or 4 wide receivers we expected to move in trades. So there really isn't much, and that's what puts the Patriots in a tough position with the Eagles is they don't have a great pivot. Now, Doubs helps in that conversation, but, the Eagles are going to say, you don't want to give us what we want? Go ahead, call the team that has the other all-pro caliber wide receiver and do a deal with them. That situation obviously isn't out there right now.
Well, Alex, it has been reported that Tom Brady wants to sabotage the Patriots, wants to see them fail. Do you believe the report that he refused to send Max Crosby to the Patriots? And if true, this report, do you think his statue should be reduced to rubble, as I do?
I mean, no, you don't take it down. He still won 6 Super Bowls. It's disappointing, right? Especially after what he said at the Super Bowl or leading up to the Super Bowl about not having a dog in the fight. It's a lot easier to say that when the Patriots never realistically could have the best offer. That's kind of where I'm at with it. And if the Patriots are really competitive and that was like a deciding factor, I think that holds a lot more weight than, the Ravens gave him the 14th overall pick. You're talking about and an additional one. You're talking about the Patriots sitting at 31. So it was disappointing to hear. I don't think it's like, I don't think somebody entirely made it up. I could see it, but it holds different weight to me to like, it's really easy to say that when you don't actually have to make that decision. He wasn't going to Kevin McHale send Max Crosby here for nothing to help the Patriots. And he's the owner of the Raiders. He shouldn't have done that. Like, I wouldn't expect him to do that. But if the Patriots had a really competitive offer, I think that report and that comment, if true, hits a lot differently. But I don't think the Patriots were in a position to compete with what the Raiders actually got.
That is true. And how much decision making does Tom Brady do when it comes to that as a minority owner also plays into it. So the statue can stay for now, and we'll see. We'll see how he behaves.
We just need to vandalize it. That's all. You don't need to take it down. We'll spray paint it.
Paint loser on it.
Put a mustache on him, something.
Yeah, a little mustache.
Yeah.
Put a Max Crosby Patriots jersey on it.
Right. There you go.